Least common multiple. Okay, our objective, we want to find the least common multiple of two or more numbers. All right, before we begin, let's talk about what is a least common multiple, often abbreviated LCM. Okay, a least common multiple, the least common multiple is the smallest number that is a multiple of each number that we're talking about. Okay, so let's see an example here. Let's talk about multiples of 3 and multiples of 5. Your multiples of 3 start off as follows. 3 times 1, 3. 3 times 2, 6. 3 times 3, 9. 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, etc., etc., etc. Your multiples of 5 start off with 5, which is 5 times 1, and then go to 10, 5 times 2, and then 15, 20, 25, etc. Those are your multiples of 3 and your multiples of 5. Now you can see we have common multiples. 15 is a common multiple to both 3 and 5. It's 3 times 5, and it's 5 times 3. 30 is also a common multiple of 3 and 5. It's 3 times 10. It's 5 times 6. If we were to keep going, 45 is a common multiple. 3 times 15, 5 times 9. 60 is a common multiple. 75, etc. So there are an infinite number of common multiples. The least common multiple is the smallest one. And as no doubt can see and guess, the least common multiple of 3 and 5 is 15. It's the smallest multiple they have in common. There are a variety of ways to find the least common multiple, but I think we'll just keep it simple. And here's what in general, here's what I think is the best way to do it for our purposes. To find the least common multiple, you know that the largest number is going to dictate it, because you have to find, it's going to be, you're going to get to it quickest from the largest number. So we got to 15 in only 3 steps here and only 3 multiples. Okay, so I would suggest you list the multiples of the largest number, and you simply stop when you reach the one that's a multiple of the other number or the other numbers. Okay, and that may require a calculator if your multiplication facts aren't great, and that's okay. You can use a calculator, but I think this way makes things fairly straightforward and simple. So example 1, let's find the least common multiple of 10 and 12. Well, 12 is our largest, so I'm going to start with my multiples of 12. And I'm going to stop when one of those is also a multiple of 10. Now I know that multiples of 10 end in a 0. So I'm going to stop when I have my first number that ends in a 0. Well, 12 times 1, that's the first multiple. Well, 10 doesn't go into 12. 12 times 2 I know is 24. Again, 24 doesn't end in a 0, so I know it's not a multiple of 10. 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 4 is 48, and if you needed to use a calculator, you can do that. 12 times 5 is 60. Oh, I would stop. I knew that this is not a multiple of 10, this one's not a multiple of 10, neither is this one, nor this one, so this is my first multiple of 12 that's also a multiple of 10, so I stop at 60, and 60 is the least common multiple of 10 and 12. Let's look at another example using three numbers. So example 2 here. Whoops. Find the least common multiple of, let's take 6, 10, and 15. Okay. Again, my suggestion is to take the largest number and just write down its multiples until you hit one that both 6 and 10, it's also a multiple for both 6 and 10. So start with 15. 15 times 1. Well, that's not a multiple of 10, and 6 is not a multiple of 6. So let's go to the next one. 30. 15 times 2. Well, 10 goes into 30 3 times. It's a multiple of 10, 10 times 3, and 6 goes into 30. It's 6 times 5. So we're done. 30 is the least common multiple of 6, 10, and 15. I think that's probably the easiest way to find least common multiples, is simply to use the largest one and work your way. And you can use a calculator to see when something is actually a multiple by using division. Okay. The question that can be asked about this is, when is this useful? This is useful with fractions. So we're just kind of briefly talk about that. Useful when adding. Let's move this up a little bit. Useful when adding and subtracting fractions. Because you need a common denominator in order to do a common unit. And with fractions, the LCM, the least common multiple, becomes what we call the least common denominator. Now you can use a common one, but it will save you time if you can find the least common one, the least common denominator. So if I were to say to you, hey, what is 3/4 plus 1/5? Well, you can't add quarters and fifths because they are different. A fifth is different than a quarter. You need a common unit. Okay, that common unit is going to be the least common multiple. Okay, or because these are fractions, it's also called the least common denominator. So again, I would suggest starting with the largest 5, and we can probably count in our heads. We know that 5 times 2 is 10. Well, 4 doesn't go into 10. 5 times 3 is 15. I'll tell you what I'll do over here. So 5 times 1 is the first multiple of 5. Well, 4 does not go into 5. 5 times 2 is 10. Well, 4 will not go into 10. 10 is not a multiple of 4. 5 times 3 is 15, but 15 is not a multiple of 4. 5 times 4 is 20. Ding, ding, ding. 20 is also a multiple of 4. That's your least common multiple, which becomes your least common denominator. And once you've done that, you can write equivalent fractions. In this case, 1/5 is 4/20. 3/4 is 15/20. And now you can add because you have a common unit, 20ths. So there's where you often see least common multiple use. So there you go. Talk a little bit about how to find the least common multiple. The least common multiple of 2 or more numbers.